The next topic would be the volume of a solid of revolution. So since we are done with solving the area using the horizontal and the vertical strip, so in this topic, you are still going to utilize the vertical and horizontal strip, but the new thing here is that the vertical strip or the horizontal strip that you're going to use is you're going to rotate it or revolve it around a certain axis, and that will create a solid. So for example, your bounded region. So for example, let's say it's a triangle, diba? Not triangle siya, diba? So let's say you're going to revolve this triangle in the y-axis. So it will create a cone, diba? So muna siya inyong volume. And again, if you're going to rotate this one using horizontal strip, so of course, it will create a certain disk, diba? Differential volume. And this is what you will utilize in our solutions later on. So again, since you know how to define the graph, you know how to, probably by now you know how to get the points of intersection. You also know how to evaluate vertical and horizontal strips. So in this topic, it will be much easy because you just have to revolve it around a certain axis. And there are three methods in defining the volume of the solid. So solid of revolution, because the solid was created through the revolution. Okay, so we have some terms here. So solid of revolution. So again, that's the solid generated. So revolve about a certain line or axis. So it's also called a line because not all the time. So advanced problems will make you revolve your bounded region on a certain line. So for example, this one is the x and y axis. Then let's say this one is your circle. Then the problem wants to revolve your bounded region in x equals 5, di ba? So, ma-create siya og donut, di ba? So, magiging siyang concept. Okay? So, that's why it's aligned, because it's not always that you have to revolve it in the x and y axis. So, you could also revolve it in any other line present in the situation. So, the axis of the solid evolution is called the fixed line. So, again, your fixed line may be the x and y axis, and it could also be any line present in the problem. Okay, so for example, this is an example of an area bounded by y equals to 3x. So that's the blue line. X-axis and x equals 1. So x equals 1 would be this line here. Then this one is the x-axis. Sorry. Okay, so this will be your bounded region. So if you try to revolve it around the x-axis, so again, it will create a volume. So ma-create siya volume, diba? So try rotating a volume around a certain axis. So I think you can appreciate this one if you have your AutoCAD class. So I think there's a command there wherein from starting from a circle, let's say square, then inyo siyang um, what's the term to extrude man siguro. Then mo expand siya on a certain axis, di ba? Ma-create din siya og volume. So I forgot to complete the correct term for the AutoCAD command. Basta na siya command na may nana siya. So for example, you have a circle, then you extend in the x-axis, so it will create a pipe. So, or SketchUp, if you know SketchUp. Okay, so notice that if we try to use a vertical strip, let's say this one is your vertical strip. if you try to revolve this one in the x-axis, so this will create a differential disk. Okay, so this one is a differential volume, or what we call as differential disk. So why is it called a disk? Because muna siya og disk ba, di ba? Ano, muna siya plato disk or hockey disk or kanang pot sa hockey, di ba? Kanang murag bola sa hockey. Okay? And this particular disk will be used in our solution later because the formulas will be coming from the differential volume. So we have a differential disk. We also have a differential washer. For example, washer is just kanang tingga, kanang satakyan. So mura siya og disk pero nailungag sa tunga. Na. So murag siya same disk but nala siya ilungag sa tunga, di ba? Na. So sa Bisaya pa tingga kana satakyan ba? Kung kiba mo matakyan o muna siya. Or in English, it's a washer. So I think you can find the washer in some bolts. So for example, this one is yours or screw. Now, let's say this one is your screw. So the next one is the washer. It protects the screw. Na, so mo na siya. Okay. So again, we are trying to refer our formula later in the differential volume, which is in the form of a disk or in a washer. And again, it will depend on the type of strip that you are using. Okay, so for the disk, most likely the disk is created if the strip that you are rotating to it is perpendicular to its axis of revolution. So for example, in this case, we are rotating in the x-axis. So the area or the differential area is perpendicular to the axis of revolution. So it creates a disk. Okay. So what if it's a horizontal strip and then we rotate in we rotate in the x-axis? So that's the other method, and it's called the cylindrical method. So first, let's talk about the method of disk and washer. So again, this is another example wherein you're going to rotate your area. So let's say this is a circle, then you rotate about the x-axis, so it creates a donut. So in mathematical terms, it's called a torus. But in simpler terms, you can just call it a donut, diba kay? Marag mo man na siya to makita dyan sa mga donut shop. Okay, so hopefully you can see the animation of this bounded region when it's rotated in a certain axis. So let's try to play it. So that will be the area or the volume generated by rotating an area around a certain axis. So this one is another example. So if we rotate this one in a certain axis, so this would be the volume generated. And notice that if you move the disk, since we are using a vertical strip, so if you try again looking on the lower left, I mean the left small box, so that's the disk that you are referring to. So again, we are trying to use the same concept that the vertical strip is consistent from left to right. Okay, so this one is another example. So notice the disk. So another example of this one. So this one is now a washer since it's not totally in line with the x-axis. So notice that the washer has a hole in the middle. So another example of a volume rotated about a certain line. So dili siya x or y axis. Okay, so those are just a few examples. So of course, during our way of solving the problem later on, so we have to do it manually because we're not allowed to use any software in um, illustrating the volume. Okay, so as what you can see in the previous slide, so you have two types of disk. So two types of kaning murag plato-plato nga naong. So you have the disk. So this is the disk. So this one is in the horizontal format. This one is in the vertical format. And then the other one is the method of washer. So it's same as the disk, but the problem here is that nara siya ilungag sa tunga. Okay. And then both are horizontal and vertical strip. So how can you know that you're going to use the disk or the washer? So if you try to analyze it um, in terms of its axis of rotation, so let me draw. So this one is a horizontal strip. So let's say you're going to rotate the horizontal strip, diba? So let's say this one is your horizontal strip. So notice that in your horizontal strip, there is no gap in between right and the left. And the left part is touching the axis of rotation. So if one part of your strip is touching the axis of rotation, so meaning it is automatically a disk. Okay. So let's say, for example, in the vertical strip. So let's say this one is the vertical strip. Okay, so notice that y top is touching a certain equation. So we don't know yet what equation it is. The bottom part of the strip, y bottom, is touching the x-axis. So meaning this creates a disk area or disk volume. And one thing to note here is that the method of disk and washer is applicable if your strip is perpendicular to the axis of rotation. Okay, so if it's not perpendicular to the axis of rotation, that would be the third method, which is the method of shells or cylinders. Okay, so the difference between the method of washer and disk is, again, if you try to draw the, the axis of rotation. So let's say this is the horizontal strip. So it's still perpendicular, but notice that the horizontal strip is not, the other part of your horizontal strip is not touching the axis of rotation anymore. So meaning your x right is a known equation, your x left is another equation as well. So same goes for the vertical strip. So if we're going to draw the vertical strip, so notice that the y top is touching one part of the graph probably, then this one is another part of the graph, y bottom. So it's not anymore the x and y axis. So that's the key difference between the disk and the washer. So again, if you try to um, define the horizontal strip of the disk, this one is XR. X left is automatically the y-axis, which is y equals 0. Diba? Then this one is y top, y bottom is the x-axis, which is equal to y equals 0. Okay, so for the green part, so meaning x and left equations are given equations. The same for the washer in the vertical aspect. So, mo na siya. All right, so again, these are all perpendicular to the axis of rotation. So let me write it here long so that you can review it later. Perpendicular to the axis of rotation. So this is both for disk and washer. So again, it's perpendicular. So if you try to draw the perpendicular angle here, so see, it's perpendicular, diba? All right, so for the formula, so I forgot to mention the formula. So for the formula, so as you can see, if you try to determine the volume of the disk, so it's just the differential area. So the differential volume is equal to area times the differential height. So in solid mensuration, it is just a basic formula of area times thickness, which is that's how you get the basic um, formula for volumes. Thickness times the cross-sectional area. So let's say if you have a rectangle, diba? So rectangle lang di lang square kay ang square kay s squared naman siya, diba? So we all know by fact that for rectangle it's length times width times height, diba? But another formula for that one is area times the thickness. So area of the square, let's say this one is um, length times width, diba? Then multiplied by the height. So length times width times height gapon siya. So ana siya. Or in if you have a cylinder, so cylinder lang kay murag mas perfect example ang cylinder for area times thickness. Okay, so let's say you have a cylinder. So as murag ang iyohan this is murag flattened out cylinder lang siya. So let's say this one is the height and then this one is the cross-sectional area, diba? Area. So area times the thickness, area times height, diba? This is the basic concept of the formula. So since we are referring it to a disk, which is just a flattened out cylinder, so the cross-sectional area is pi r squared, diba? So kaning babaw is a circle. That's why it's pi r squared. And then the differential strip, which is coming from your horizontal strip or vertical strip, that would be dh, which is the thickness of the strip that you are using. Okay, so that's why it's pi r squared times dh. So if you try to formulate now the volume for each of the horizontal and vertical disk, it will translate it into these formats. Meaning this one is the vertical disk, this one is the horizontal disk. So again, there is no y bottom because y bottom is equal to 0. Diba? That's the axis of rotation. Same goes for the horizontal disk. That is the same. That's pi r x right squared only. Okay? So actually, you can just memorize one formula you can just memorize the formula for the washer, because if you look at the washer, it's the same format as your method of disk, but it's just without the y bottom and the y the x left component, diba? As you can see here. So this one, if it's a disk, this one's becomes zero, diba? And if this one is zero, it is just completely the same as the method of disk formula. So ana siya murag ako lang siyang gilahi para at least ma-appreciate niyo ang dagway sa disk and sa washer. But in terms of formula, so you can just use the formula for the method of washer. Okay, if you are going to evaluate it using the method of disk, the y bottom and the x left component will be zeroed out in the process of your calculation. So murag-mura na siya. Okay, so for the washer, so probably the best explanation that I can give you in this washer is that I think you have this one in your high school. So for example, you're going to solve for the net area of this one, diba? So what you have to do is just have to solve the bigger area first, diba? Area outer minus area inner, diba? That's what you're doing in your high school problems kaning solving for the net area. So muna siya ang explanation dire. So pi r outer squared minus pi r inner squared. So if it's a disk, so you don't have to minus anything in the center part, diba? That's why you can just memorize one formula. Okay, so questions so far before we proceed with the examples?
None so far, sir.
Okay, so let's proceed with the first example. So find the volume of the solid of revolution obtained by revolving the plane region R bounded by y equals square root of x, or in other terms, this can also be expressed in its parabola form, y squared is equal to x. Ano, diba? But at least you can see that it's a parabola. The x-axis and the line x equals 4 about the x-axis. Okay, so about the x-axis, so meaning we are rotating about the x-axis. So this one is the axis of rotation. Okay, so I'm just going to give you the graph directly, and we can just solve the answer right away. So again, I leave the graphing part to you because the graphing part is it takes time. It takes time, but probably by now dapat kiwa na mo mag-graph. Okay, so for a while. Okay, so since this one is a vertical strip, so after determining the bounded region and using the vertical strip, so the next thing that you need to do is to rotate it. So since we are not kanang mga computer-based na kuan, yeah, manual math method, so just try to replicate the parabola on the other side, symmetrical siya. Then try to create a disk na rotation. Okay. So this must be found in your solution sa inyong final exam and also as well sa inyong assignment. Okay, so yun na siya. Okay, so since this one is a vertical strip, so coming from the formula, so the formula is volume is equal to pi from x1 to x2, and then this would be y top squared directly, and then dx. So dali na kayo siya, di ba? So again, formulating the equation is super easy because you have the format for your um, formula already. Ang difficult part ani is the graphing aspect. Okay, so again, it's about the x-axis. So I think by now you can directly solve this one using your calculator. So from 0 to 4, that would be the x range. And then this one would be square root of x and then squared dx. And then you have your volume. So volume is equal to,
8 pi
so
or 25.1.
so 8 pi. Then this one is cubic units because it's volume, diba? So if you recall your basic solid geometry, so we try to express our volume in cubic centimeter, cubic meter, cubic millimeter, so on and so forth. So since this one, we don't know the exact unit that you're going to use, so it's just cubic units. So dali na kayo siya, no? So murag sisiyo kayo ni. So this would be the solution. So as you can see, dapat inani ninyo ang kuan drawing sa inyong exam. Ganun siya. So for the other elements, just try to um, place it all in one drawing. And then this would be the solution. Okay, so let's go to another problem. So this time we're going to use the horizontal strip. So it's still a disk because the axis of rotation is about the y-axis. Okay, so again, we're going to rotate it in the y-axis. So just try to replicate again the right side of the horizontal strip. And this will create a, so medyo batignaw akong disk. Okay, so this one is your horizontal disk. So x right is the parabola, or I mean the curve, y equals x cubed. And of course, this one is y-axis, or x equals 0. Then this one is y equals to 3. Okay, so by formula again, horizontal disk, that would be pi and then x right squared dy from y1 to y2. And then just directly replace it, diba? So from 0 to 3, then x right is y equals x squared. So in terms of x, this in terms of y, this one is cube root of y. So cube root of y and then dy. Then you get your volume already using your calculator. So cube root of y squared pa din siya, squared. Okay, so don't forget the squared. So probably the calculator will give you the answer a bit longer because it's dealing with the cube root function. Okay, so the answer is, or wala pa gawa sa calculator.
Wala pa gyapon nagawa sa kuha, sir.
Wala pa.
Wala pa sa ako, sir.
Sige, ato lang icon kay. Just try to verify this one. So this one is 11.76. So, di ba, murag mo na siya ang disadvantage if you have a complicated kanang equation. So, of course, we are forced to use this equation because what am I line term, di ba? So 11.76 cubic units. Okay, and this is the answer. So, pwede rin siya, wala rin siya ng mga lines ha. So, this one is just for the sake of understanding the concept of the differential volume. And this leads to the equation itself. So, pwede ra katong equation na inyong ibutang and then you write your katong mga tag 3 lines lang ana, pwede ra siguro ni. Ana. So, write first the equation, then you write the corresponding values for the variables, then the answer. Ana. So, pwede ra siya ana sa karon gi. You can use your calculator. Okay, so 11.76 cubic units. So let's now go to the method of washer. So notice that this one is a washer because if you try to get the disc, so na siya lungag, di ba? Because the bottom part is not touching anymore the axis of rotation. So na muna siya kanang tingga, di ba? Bali ang atong drawing. So the blue line is the y squared equals 8x, and then the red one is kaning y equals x squared. So again, dapat kipa mo graph sa equation, gibasan mo determine sa points of intersection. Okay, so determining the washer. So murag muna siyang washer, di ba? Then for the center part, let's say muna siya. Okay, so mo siyang tingga, di ba? So for again the volume, just write the formula. x1 to x2, and then you're going to have y top squared minus y bottom squared dx. So pi, and then from x1 to x2, that would be from 0 to 2. Then the first one is y top squared, which is coming from this equation. Then translating it in terms of y alone, di siya y squared. So this will give us this term here. So it's square root of 8x squared. And then minus y bottom squared. Then you have y equals x squared. So x squared. x squared and then squared, which is yeah, dx. And then you get the volume. Diba? Dali ra kayo, diba? So the answer would be
48 over 5 pi.
so it's 48 over 5 pi.
Or 30.2.
48 over 5, no? Or it's
Yes, sir.
30.2 cubic units. All right, so that would be the answer, and then this would be the corresponding solution. So let's now go to this problem. So what if you are not rotating anymore in the y-axis? So of course, what we need to do is, um, so this one is still a washer, but if we are just rotating about x equals -1. So again, we try to replicate the drawing. Wait. Okay, so na siya ilungag, di ba? And then, so marangana ang iyang volume. Okay? So what if we're going to rotate about x equals -1? So medyo kailangan to sabto ng problem karon because we're not rotating anymore in the x or y axis. So let's write the formula first. So since this one is a horizontal strip, so this should be x right squared minus x left squared dy from y1 to y2. So your x right is just the red graph, so meaning kani siya nga term, di ba? So this one is automatically your x right. This one x right. Now the x left is the y-axis, which is equal to x equals 0. So this one is your x left, which is equal to x equals 0. So our problem here is how can we interpret the -1 distance going to the the axis of rotation, di ba? Because that would be the radius, di ba? So always take note that kanatong equation is coming from the differential volume, which is outer radius, inner radius concept. So if this one is our center, going towards this distance, diba? 1, diba? 1 unit going to the y-axis, and then going to this unit here is the entire x, right? Diba? So meaning our outer radius, so again, take note that you have to understand that this one is the outer radius, this one is the inner radius. In case of you are rotating it in another line. So dili siya sa x or y axis. So if it's on the other line, let's say -1, 4, 3, so you have to understand the concept of outer radius and inner radius because you have to base those distances from the axis of revolution or axis of rotation, which in this case, in this problem, it's x equals -1. So again, to clearly define what I'm talking about, so let's change color. Okay lang, blue lang. So again, this one is our axis of rotation. You're rotating about x equals -1. So again, the concept of outer radius and inner radius. So since this one is our axis of rotation, so going towards the y-axis, that would be 1 unit. Going towards the outer portion, which is the outer radius, that would be that length is xr, di ba? So meaning our outer radius is 1 plus xr. Nakasabot ra? Okay. So our inner radius, so going to this distance is 1 unit, di ba? 1 unit. Or if you are referring it with the other one, so that would be -1, di ba? If coming from the y-axis, so -1 siya. So your inner radius is -1 distance or 1 na 1 unit. So inner radius man siya, di ba? So inner radius 1, -1, then plus 0, di ba? Then this one is plus 0. So 0 distance man ta kay mao na siya ang ato ang gi kuan gihunungan, di ba? So it's x left, but x left is the y-axis, so that's why it's 0. X left, x left. Okay. So in formula terms now, so you can use this one, or you may also use your distance from left to right or from right to left. So if from right to left ni, this would be xr minus -1, which is still the same, di ba? It gives you this value gyapon. So this one is from right to left. This one is from left to right. Okay, so hope you understand this one. Kani siya bali ni siya right to left, kani siya left to right. So this one is x right. So this would give you 1 plus, so xr is the square root of 4 minus y squared. And then squared pa dyan siya, di ba? And then minus the inner radius, which is negative, let's say, or just 1 squared, di ba? Okay, since we are using from left to right. Left to right ni siya, kani siya. Left to right ni siya tanan. The other one is right to left. Kaning wala, again circle. And then dx rather. Then the limit of integration is from -2 to 2. So -2 going towards 2. So the other format, if you are using right to left, that would give you -2 to 2. And then this would be square root of 4 minus y squared minus -1. Okay, paatras man ta, di ba? Paatras ta. And then minus negative 1 squared dx, which is totally the same gyapon siya, di ba? Then this would be the volume. So probably again, it will take some time. Since na square root, then square pa jud siya, then is binomial pa jud. Okay, so the answer would be 72.99. Okay, palita madugay. Cubic units. Okay, and then this would be the solution. So again, try to understand the concept of inner and outer radius. Outer radius, then this one is inner radius. R sub I. So this one is from right to left na yung solution na, because it's starting from the red graph, x right. This one is x right. This one is going towards negative 1. X equals negative 1 is siya. Then this one is x left, which is 0. Then x equals negative 1 dayon. So from right to left na yung solution. So ganina, katong akong pag-present is the two ways, the left to right and the right to left. Okay, so the third method, which is quite different from the method of disc and washer. So probably it's the same, but this time the strip that you are using is now parallel to the axis of rotation. So earlier, dapat perpendicular ato ang strip, di ba? So ganina, let's say this one is our triangle. And we rotate it about the y-axis. So let's say y-axis. So if you're going to use the disc or washer, so this one creates a disc, di ba? Rotating about the y-axis. So what if you're going to use the counterpart? Let's say you can also use it using the vertical strip. So of course, if it's possible, as long as the vertical strip is consistent. So let's say this one now is parallel to the axis of rotation, di ba? It's not perpendicular anymore. So ang yang ma-create is kani siya. Mura siyang hollow cylinder or a cylindrical shell. So muna siya yung ma-create. Cylindrical shell. So I think that's the difference between the two. So the strip for the disc and the washer is perpendicular to the axis of rotation. For shell, it's now parallel to the axis of rotation. Parallel to the axis of rotation. So if you're going to understand how the formula works, so imagine again that this one is your cylindrical shell. And let's say sa inyong cylindrical shell, let's cut it on this side here and we lay it open. So mura ka ng bond paper, di ba? If imo siyang himuon og kanang cylinder, so muna siya, di ba? It's a cylindrical shell or hollow nga cylinder. But if you try to open the cylinder, mura siya og papel, di ba? Muna siya. So the top portion is kani siyang edge here. Kaning edge sa yung circle is the circumference, di ba? That's why it's 2 pi r. And this cut portion here, kani siya, ang atong gi-expose, kani siya, kaning vertical nga differential strip. That would be your differential x or y depending kung aa siya naghigda. Diba? So kani siya, if imo ni isumpay sa other end, this would create a cylinder. So just try to practice it on your home if na may bond paper. So try creating a cylinder by joining the ends together. So mo na siya. Okay, so of course this one is the height, and we all know by fact that um, the formula for the volume is area times thickness. So 2 pi r, that would be the distance or the circumference of the circle, kani siya, multiplied by the height times the thickness, di ba? So length times width times height kaya po ni siya ang concept. That's why it's here. So length would refer to 2 pi r, width would be the height, and then the height would be the differential strip, di ba? Or the differential radius. So muna siya yung kuan. So again, if you're not really into understanding the concept behind the formula, so of course you can just memorize this one. Vertical shell, and then the other one is horizontal shell. Okay, so let's try to answer now some problems. So let's try to answer the problem again katong sa method of disk if we are going to get the same answer. So this time we're going to use method of shell. So since this one will create a horizontal cylinder or horizontal na shell, di ba? So wag muna siya yung ma-create na shell, di ba? So again, the formula would be 2 pi, and then since it's horizontal shell, sorry, excuse me. Okay, so 2 pi y, and then x right minus x left, and then dy from y1 to y2. So simple as that, diba? So x right is the green graph, which is the line x equals 4. X left is the blue graph, which is coming from the parabola. That would be, so this one instead of y, this would now be y squared is equal to x. So this is x equals y squared, or this one, diba? So our limit of integration is now in the y direction. So that would be from 0 to 2. So 0 towards 2. So 2 pi from 0 to 2 times y. So kanang y is just y ba? Because that is the radius. And then x right is 4. And then minus x left, that would be x squared dy. Then hopefully we get the same volume. So again, you may try to um, simplify this one. So this one is y squared I. So you can try to simplify it first by multiplying y kay para dili kay siya dako og hago sa inyong calculator. So this becomes 4y minus y cubed dy. Ana. So pili siya inana para dili kay dako og hago inyong calculator. Okay, so the answer would be 8 pi gapon, di ba? So I think the difference between the two methods is that um, what I can say about it is I think it's the same as the area. So let's say, for example, in the problem, you're able to use all methods. So you can use, for the disk, it's either um, one type of strip lang yung gamiton because it needs to be perpendicular, di ba? So I think what I can conclude here is that if you are able to solve the volume using the two methods, so two lang because disk and washer are most likely similar. So I think it's the same as the area, wherein if you are able to solve using horizontal or vertical strip, so I think it's the same for this one. If you're able to solve using method of shell and method of disk, I think you can just choose the method wherein the expression is much easier para mas dali sa calculator. But of course, you can also di na matter if lisod, di ba kay the calculator is always there. But again, there are instances nga let's say the equation is complicated. Yan, base niya at the end of the solving part sa calculator, mo math error siya. Dili din niya kaya i-solve kay it's too complicated. So I think muna siya ang kailangan niyo mahibaw-an if you're able to solve two methods. So if the other one is complicated, try to avoid it as much as possible. Diba? So again, if you are able to solve it using two methods, if dili, and you are forced to deal with a complicated situation or complicated equation, so what ay mahimo, diba? Because there's only one method to use. But again, if you have an alternative, try using the alternative. Try using the easier method kay para mas dali mo gawas ang answer. All right? So this is the solution. So murag mas nindot at tanawon ang graphical sa Desmos no compared sa manual. All right, so I'm going to post your assignment later. So medyo daghan-daghan ni siya. This one is for the method of disk and washer. You can also call it rings as well. So ano siya? So some books refer it to rings. Ano siya, rings. So 8 problems and then for the cylinder 8 problems as well para at least makakuan mo. So murag mas dali man ang formula, di ba? But the difficult part is the graphing aspect. So at least I have given you some problems to practice with sa inyong kuan. So dapat ang inyong graph is with solution, especially for creating the graph and then getting the points of intersection. And I apologize for last meeting. Wala ko nakagive sa answers sa previous assignment, but these are the answers for the assignment that I'm going to give you. So try to ignore set 9, set 10. Okay, I have yet to edit my PowerPoint. So this one is referring to the disk and washer assignment. This one is referring to shells. Okay, so questions or clarifications before we end our session?